The Tyranids are not advancing with confidence. They are advancing with urgency. This distinction matters because conquest leaves scars that look very different from desperation. An empire that intends to rule reshapes territory. It fortifies. It builds systems meant to last. The Tyranids do none of this. They arrive, consume, strip worlds down to mineral silence, and then abandon them completely. Not even symbolic presence remains. No shrines, no guardians, no long-term bioforms adapted to maintain territory. Entire sectors are reduced to nothing, and the Hive fleets move on as if lingering would be dangerous. That behavior is not how victors behave. It is how survivors behave. Imperial scholars describe the Hive mind as endlessly patient, methodical, and inevitable. That description is comforting, because inevitability suggests predictability. But the Tyranids are not predictable. Their routes shift without explanation. Their targets change mid-invasion. Entire campaigns are abandoned after catastrophic overcommitment, as if something more important suddenly demanded attention elsewhere. This is not random. It is reactive. The Hive mind is responding to pressures we cannot see. Within the lore, the shadow in the warp is often framed as an offensive weapon, a psychic smothering field that crushes morale and blinds astropaths. But that interpretation misses a more disturbing possibility. The shadow behaves like insulation. It dampens psychic detection in every direction, not just toward prey. It collapses warp activity into a suffocating silence around Tyranid fleets. That is not how one announces their arrival. That is how one hides, and hiding only matters if there is something worth hiding from. There are moments in Tyranid history where the Hive mind's composure fractures. Encounters with Necron null technologies do not provoke curiosity or adaptation in the usual Tyranid manner. They provoke withdrawal, silence, sudden strategic recalculation. The Hive mind does not experiment when confronted with certain kinds of annihilation. It disengages, not because it cannot win, but because something about that form of erasure is unacceptable. This is the first crack in the myth of the fearless devourer. The Tyranids are not driven by hunger in the way most narratives suggest. Hunger implies growth, expansion, accumulation. But Tyranid consumption correlates far more closely with maintenance than escalation. Splinter fleets deteriorate rapidly when isolated. Genetic coherence breaks down. Behavioral uniformity collapses. Bioforms become erratic, feral, unstable. This is not evolution. It is entropy. The Hive mind is holding itself together by feeding. Every world consumed is not a step toward ascension. It is a stabilizing injection of biomass and psychic coherence into a system that is constantly threatening to fragment. The Tyranids are massive, but they are not infinite. They bleed cohesion every moment they exist. Without constant intake, the Hive mind does not merely weaken. It begins to unravel into incompatible instincts and dead genetic memory. This reframes every invasion, not as a conquest, but as life support. And here, quietly, without spectacle, is where I want to hear from you. Not agreement, interpretation. If you believe the Tyranids are still true apex predators, still destined rulers of the galaxy, say so. If you see the same cracks forming, the same signs of long-term collapse, held back only by endless consumption, put that into words. The lore supports both readings, and the difference matters more than most people realize. Because beyond the galaxy, beyond the Astronomican's reach, beyond even the warp's screaming reflection of thought, there is silence. Not peaceful silence, absence. There are regions of intergalactic void described not as dead, but as empty in a way that resists observation. No psychic echo, no warp turbulence, no lingering imprint of life ever having existed there. This is not how chaos scours reality. Chaos leaves scars. These regions leave nothing. The Tyranids did not evolve in the presence of the warp, as humanity understands it. Their psychic architecture is alien, tightly controlled, resistant to feedback, almost as if they were shaped by a threat that punishes exposure. Their adaptations make sense if the universe outside this galaxy is hostile to consciousness itself. The most unsettling possibility is not that the Tyranids are the greatest predators to ever exist. It is that they are the second greatest, that their entire evolutionary history is shaped by something that hunts at a scale where galaxies are not prizes, but terrain, something that does not feed, does not corrupt, does not dominate. It simply removes. If such an entity exists, then the Tyranids' behavior becomes tragically logical. They do not settle because settling makes you visible. They do not rule because permanence invites detection. They consume quickly, violently, and completely because stripping a region of life leaves fewer signals behind. Even the warp itself is quieter where the Tyranids pass. The galaxy is not being eaten. It is being used as cover. From this perspective, the Imperium is not facing extinction at the claws of an unstoppable devourer. It is being hollowed out by an intelligence hiding inside it, feeding just enough to stay coherent, while something far worse draws closer from the dark between galaxies. The Hive Mind does not look forward to a final victory. It looks forward to delay, and when the Tyranids eventually leave, if they ever do, it will not be because they were defeated. It will be because they no longer need this galaxy to survive. If the day ever comes when the Tyranids stop eating, stop arriving, stop casting their shadow across the warp, that will not be a sign of salvation. It will mean they found somewhere safer to run. If the Tyranids are fleeing something, the question is not what could defeat them in battle. Many forces in the galaxy can do that. Entire Hive fleets have been shattered before. That has never slowed the advance in any meaningful way. What matters is what can end the Hive Mind as a system. The Tyranids do not fear loss. They accept annihilation at the scale of billions without hesitation. Individual bioforms, entire fleets, even genetic lineages are expendable. What is never treated as expendable is synaptic continuity. Wherever the Hive Mind risks fragmentation beyond recovery, its behavior changes instantly. Withdrawal replaces adaptation. Conservation overrides aggression. This gives us a constraint. Whatever the Tyranids fear must attack cohesion, not bodies. This is why chaos, for all its horror, does not represent an existential threat to the Hive Mind. Chaos feeds on emotion, excess, contradiction. The Tyranids do not meaningfully generate these things. They do not despair, do not desire, do not hate in ways the warp can metabolize. When demonic incursions clash with Tyranid swarms, the result is not corruption, it is friction. Violent, destructive, but ultimately survivable. The Hive Mind loses mass, not identity. The same is true of most galactic scale weapons. Even exterminatus, even star-killing technologies, remove biomass faster than the Tyranids would prefer, but they do not erase the underlying intelligence. The Hive Mind can regrow from catastrophic loss as long as memory, pattern, and signal persist. Necron technologies are different. Certain Necron weapons do not kill. They delete. They sever matter and energy from causality itself. They disrupt the warp, not by dominating it, but by negating its influence entirely. Where such weapons are deployed at scale, there is no psychic residue for the Hive Mind to absorb, analyze, or adapt to. Information itself disappears. This is intolerable to an intelligence that survives through continuity. The Tyranids' unusual caution around Necron dynasties is not fear of defeat. It is fear of irreversible damage. A synapse node erased by null field annihilation does not scream as it dies. It leaves nothing behind, no echo, no lesson, no memory. Now extend that logic outward, beyond the Milky Way. If there exists a force or condition that operates universally on that principle, removing information, flattening psychic structure, collapsing identity into non-existence, then the Tyranids' migration begins to make sense without invoking speculation beyond the law's boundaries. They would not need to be chased. They would simply need to recognize a spreading dead zone. A universe where consciousness cannot persist is a universe the Hive Mind cannot inhabit. This reframes the Tyranids' relationship with the galaxy. They are not preparing it for consumption at leisure. They are exploiting a region where psychic noise, warp turbulence, and dense intelligent life create interference that masks them. The Imperium's endless wars, the Chaos God's howling presence, even the Astronomicon itself may be providing cover. Ironically, humanity's suffering may be what makes the galaxy survivable to the Hive Mind. There is no need to assume the Tyranids know exactly what is coming. Fear does not require understanding. It requires pattern recognition. The Hive Mind has likely encountered regions where expansion simply ended, not in battle, not in fire, but in silence so complete that nothing returned. No bioforms, no signal, no adaptive response. That kind of loss cannot be outgrown. So the Tyranids move laterally instead of forward. They consume while remaining mobile. They prioritize cohesion over dominion. They behave not like rulers in waiting, but like an intelligence buying time in a shrinking universe. And this is where the tragedy sharpens. If the Tyranids fail, the galaxy does not win. It simply becomes visible. The Imperium believes survival comes from holding ground. The Tyranids believe survival comes from never being where the end arrives. One of these strategies may already be obsolete. If the Hive Mind truly is a refugee intelligence, then its presence is not the beginning of the end. It is a warning that the end has already started elsewhere, and warnings, in Warhammer, are almost never heeded.